Back again. This time it's my 2005 Honda R12x Aquatrax. On my F12X was the Mazda VJ26 cartridge that I'd put on as a replacement turbo, which has the opposite sides of water cooling, which I drilled the hole and made that oil cooled. Same thing with the Isuzu cartridge. So Isuzu has both the cooling ports on the same side. If you block up the top one, you drill the hole through the bottom one to get into the oil jackets. If you block up the bottom one, then the top one you have got free, and you'll drill that across, like my previous video, how you drill across on an angle. You'll do the same here, drill it across on the angle. So for the details of that, look at my previous video about the actual Mazda turbo, which unfortunately quite frequently I was referring incorrectly to as being Isuzu. But the Mazda turbo, water flow from side to side, drill it out, it becomes oil. Isuzu cartridge, water on both sides here, and you can drill out whichever one. On the OEM Hondas, the bottom one is already drilled out so that it goes directly into the drain pipe area as well. So I'll show inside the jet ski in a moment. So inside the jet ski, this is the top oil feed line. Sometimes you might need to cut the little edge bit off of there to make it fit on the top of the Isuzu turbo. This is the bottom oil drain line. I'll show you a process of how I'm extending that with a flexible hose in between to make it easier to bolt the turbo in situ in this little small area here. And then the third oil line, which drains out the side, which comes out of here, I put a threaded nipple in there. There's going to be, from that, a rubber line of whatever length is going to make it easier to line up. Then I've got this particular nipple set up here with a threaded section that goes straight over. If I can just temporarily screw that on there. So imagine this is the banjo bolt for the existing oil line going down underneath the to the bottom of the motor that normally goes onto the side of the turbo. So if it normally goes onto the side, and now this one is on the side, there'll be a hose between this and that, which ends up being the easy spot to do of literally just joining the hose between becomes your simple method of installing that part of it. I'll go to the lower drain hose, which is this oil hose here that has the two 10mm bolts in. I'll explain that process in a minute when I go over to my other little workbench area. So again, this is the oil line out the side of the Isuzu that I just spoke about, the banjo. This would normally be the oil line that goes down underneath the side of the engine. So that would just be joined up by whatever length of hose that you want, to give you that flexibility in relation to putting a non-standard turbo on the Aquatraxes. Now the same will go, I'll just move them to the side, the same will go with the two 10mm bolt section. I'm just making a couple of aluminium brackets, aluminium templates, which a few different lengths of piping that's been flared, and then I'll flare the other end as well when it goes over, for going over the top of the hose. So by doing these drilling these holes, putting a piece in on each one of them, don't forget to put gaskets as well. That means there'll be one there, and the other one will be on the bottom of the turbo. This one will be bolted up to the actual oil line itself, creating another spout out of that oil line that goes down to the sump. So this is the drain, and then again this will be underneath the turbo, piece of hose clamped in place, another piece of hose down, clamped on that one with these ends slightly flared. The reason why I'm doing that is to extend that oil line and the side oil line to accommodate putting on the actual turbo a lot easier. And then if ever I want to go back to the standard OEM turbo, I can just unbolt all of this stuff, all of these things, and then I've still got the banjo bolts set up that will just go straight into the side of the standard turbo just by removing stuff. And then I'll remove this particular joiner piece, and then that oil line from underneath with the two 10mm bolts will bolt back into the bottom of the standard turbo. So these little extenditures will help me make it easier to just fit non-standard turbo. In this case, on my R12X, I'm fitting the Isuzu turbo. On my previous video, I was fitting the Mazda turbo to my F15, F12X. I'm thinking of aircraft now. So yes, my F12X had those particular slightly different line setups, which are all explained on that video. And this is the R12X modification. So hopefully that makes plenty of sense. Just show you those bits there. And then just be wary that whatever length bit of hose that you put in between this join and between this join, the banjo bolt going into this little setup here is hollow, so it allows the oil to still flow through and go from the turbo down through there. But whatever length of hose that you put on, this is obviously a small bit, I'm planning on putting slightly larger, whatever length of hose you put on will mean that you'll have a slightly larger oil capacity, so take that into consideration when you're doing an oil change. Now, just a workshop thing again, when I pull apart my jet skis, I like to keep the parts either very close by and organised. On my previous video, I actually had, the trailer had a couple of poles here with shelving on them, whereas I've come up with a different idea on this particular pull apart. I've got clamps on the side here, which you can either have tarp going from one side of the trailer to the other. In this case, I've just got old bed quilt, and then you can see I just carefully place all my containers of bolts, all my bits and pieces off of the actual Aquatrax itself. So it's quite easily just clamp it on, and I've got all my side panels and everything all stored off the ground and underneath the actual jet ski itself. And then if I need to move the trailer around, all the parts are still with it, apart from the seat, which is just here obviously. Okay, so I've completed making the end bits here. So what we've got is I use this little drill attachment to put a flange into that particular section there, and then I've also used pipe flanging tool to put a very slight flange on here so that it can't go across, and I've done the same up the other end as well. This is for a proof of concept, so obviously put gaskets at each end. This end here will bolt down onto, with these flanges that I've made, that'll bolt onto the flange from the oil line coming up from the bottom of the motor. So then this flange will bolt onto that flange, and then I haven't clamped these on yet, but this is to show you that I will then have that amount of flexibility to have this section bolted up to the bottom of the turbo itself. So when this is bolted up to the bottom of the turbo, and that flange is bolted to the flange on the actual oil drain pipe, they will be in situ like that, approximately like that, and then one end will be clamped, the other end I'll just feed on and clamp in situ once I've got the turbo where I want it. So that's my test piece at the moment for proof of concept, and then I'll build a better setup later on. But that should work fine. It'll let me test the ski out, and then I can either get pipes made and bent to the shape that I want, along those lines, making sure use gaskets as well. So this is the other pipe. That's the nipple that goes into the side of the actual turbo, and then this is the banjo bolt section. So that's just threaded with the same sort of nipple on there, so it's flow through access, which is the same with the hole through the centre of the banjo bolt obviously. So the banjo oil line coming also from the bottom of the motor coming up, that needs to bolt into the side of the turbo. This will screw on in place, and then that will be screwed to the side of the turbo already, and then this hose piece I'll just connect on in situ once the turbo is actually in place. So this process will make putting the turbo in place so much easier when you're using like an aftermarket turbo. You could even do these modifications for the standard OEM turbo if you want. So again, this is the custom oil drain line that I've made. It'll go in here and it will bolt up to that oil drain pipe there. So you can see the flanges. The one that I've made is square at the moment, doesn't have to be a specific shape as long as the holes line up, and the oil drain can go down there. and then obviously this one turns around and goes to the bottom of the turbo. And then this line I've got propped up at the moment, but it normally sits down under the wastegate manifold, so this will be technically out of your view and out of the way of the bottom of the turbo itself. And then further down here is the banjo bolt line. So I've just got a rag propping this up at the moment to stop the oil leaking out of it. So hopefully that shows you what I'm actually doing. And this end here will just curve around and be on the bottom of the actual turbo itself. And then, as I mentioned before, you could do this sort of setup for the OEM turbos as well, if you want to make an OEM turbo easier to get off and on. So a quick update. These flanges that I made with a countersink so that they would like sit nice and flush, ends up being that when they're bolted in place they move around too much and there's a chance of oil leak. So both of these ones, I thought having them nice and flush would be the way to go. So I've now had to make another couple more flanges without doing the countersink this time. They're going to be flared out with the flaring tool. So the flared section will allow them, stand by, once it's flared it'll go over the lip of that particular part of the oil return line. I'll still put a gasket around that area there, so the flared part will also squash against the gasket, and then it will probably have an ever so slight gap like that. It'll be the flange pulling against the flared section when I flare that out that will squash it in nice and tight when the bolts are in place. So obviously you have bolts in place. These ones are probably not long enough, I don't think, but yeah, I'll get some bolts that are long enough, and that will create that sort of a join. And then I'll do the same with the other flange. It'll be similar like this at the bottom of the turbo, and by flaring the ends on the piece of pipe that I bend for that one will mean that this will sit out the bottom of the turbo. A rubber hose will come around and then join on to this section here. So that will come out the bottom of the turbo. There will literally be like a 90-degree rubber hose bend, because this will be the flanged section that goes down in underneath the wastegate manifold itself. Underneath the wastegate manifold, on the bottom of the turbo, again, gaskets accordingly. Bolts will hold it all nice and tightly in place, prevent any oil leaks, and the rubber hose will join these two sections, meaning that the turbo can easily be removed or put on, whether it's an OEM turbo or in this case an Isuzu aftermarket turbo. So that's version 2.0. When you get sort of proof of concept, you can then get proper actual lines made up, proper extension lines to look like these particular ones, chrome, stainless steel, whatever. But at the moment I'm just making them out of aluminium and bending pipes to get the shapes I want, to be able to set it up and make sure that proof of concept works. Just a quick update. So I've flared that end now, and the flared end fits nicely over the actual drain line, so when that gets bolted together, won't get any oil leaks. I will be putting a gasket here, as I mentioned. I've got lots of old car gaskets, gaskets all over the place, so I'll just cut a particular gasket that's a large round circle that'll take up that whole void there, so that when this bolts up, it'll make the flange area, the flared area, sorry, bolt up nice and tight and seal against this drain tube. So that's just the latest update of that flared section there. The flange will actually be, when it's all bolted, holds it down nice and tight against the drain pipe. So I found a brand new gasket off of a 4-cylinder car manifold, a car I don't have anymore, and I have cut sections of that gasket that are perfect for over the top of here. I'll just temporarily hold that in place, and now that I've flanged that, it's hard to hold all together there, but that will be the gasket that will basically go in between the flared end and that drain pipe there that's normally in the Aquatrax going to the actual sump. So that's just to show that you can easily make gaskets out of any other gaskets you've got laying around. I'm going to use a gasket goo paste just to hold it in position while I do up bolts when it's inside the actual jet ski itself. So gasket will sit there, gasket goo will hold it in place, and then that flared section will go straight over the top. Bolts and nuts in there, bolt and hold it together nice and tightly. So, not enough room in the turbo, obviously, so I've had to cut this section down. So that's now smaller. That goes onto there. Face it whichever direction you need. Then the hose goes onto that accordingly. And then I've changed my plans with the bottom of the turbo. I've actually got like a nipple like this, tapped a thread and screwed it in there. There's plenty of room in here, like you put the gasket on, obviously there's plenty of room for this thread to go up inside the turbo anyway. As you can see, there's the void in the turbo that can bolt up underneath there, and then I can run a hose off of it that will go to the actual so it'll go on there, and then it will feed onto that one as well. So that's my new setup, my latest update that will help me make it a much easier process again for removing or installing turbos. So this is approximately how it will be set up. Got that oil drain at the bottom there, the one at the side. It'll go down into place there accordingly. And then hopefully you can see this is now the oil drain one, and that is the side one there as well with the banjo bolt. And they're basically all set up, and they are flexible enough that I can easily get them through to the areas that they need to connect the hoses onto. OEM Honda Aquatrax Turbo, Isuzu, cartridge, Alibaba, top to the cartridge there. Slightly taller, slightly different setups. This is slightly larger than that particular one there. If you're using an OEM Honda inlet turbine side, you would need to put a spacer on to allow the fins that are slightly taller to clear the actual housing. Whereas this housing here, don't know if you can see it, it's already got the extra groove enlarged, so you don't need the spacer. That will just go straight on there and the turbine can still spin. However, this particular housing, the holes don't line up. They are the same holes that would line up with the OEM Honda Turbo, but the holes in the cartridge for the Isuzu don't line up with this housing. So what I've done is line the two turbos up, moved this around, which is basically called clocking, into the position where they're both lined up the same, marked all the holes, done an automatic center punch down into each hole so I know where to drill, and that's for this Isuzu RHF5 cartridge. The little tap I'm using to re-tap the holes is an M 4.5 by 0.75. So what I've done is I removed the bolt out of an OEM turbo and just quickly checked the thread size with a nut, and once I confirmed that that's the thread, then I went through my tap and die set and found the tap that goes perfectly, and it happened to be that size tap. So that'll be my my next job, is drill out all those holes, tap them through so that all of that lines up how I want it to go inside the actual R12x Honda Aquatrax that I've got, and then all my custom oil piping will screw into this accordingly as well. So hopefully that explains the differences. This space is around about 2 mil, so if you're using a OEM turbo housing on top of this, then that would space it up enough, but you have to get them made up. There's all sorts of machine shops that can make them up if you can't make them up yourself. So the Isuzu Turbo threads have been tapped, and I've just put my own bolts in there, leaving all my other bolts in the OEM Turbo for when I eventually rebuild that. This bit here was facing opposite way, but you just put a ring spanner over it, whichever way you want to, and then put a bit of pressure on, and it can move around to where you want it to sit. So just to give you a quick example, spanner over like that, and then slightly turn it, then you can get it to whatever location. Or if you want to move it back, put the spanner over this way, and then move the pressure accordingly. Just for those of you that didn't know how to move that very tight tube there, it's a quick way how to do it. So the update, that's how it's going to sit in the jet ski inlet. That's where the drill hole went through, blocked off. This is the little side drain pipe. That hose connects up to my other joiner piece, as I mentioned before. However, this section here where I've done a flange and tapped a thread in and put that nipple section in, that's all sealed in nicely, ready for hose and clamps to go on. But where it feeds onto the actual line that goes to the bottom of the engine, the flared bit did not seal against there with a gasket like I was hoping it would. It had a very slight leak, so now I'm going to discard this whole setup, tap a thread into this one, and then I'll just literally run a hose from the nipple at the bottom there into what will be another nipple on this one here that will bolt onto the existing Honda Aquatrax line. So it'll literally be two sections joined by a length of hose, because yeah, unfortunately I just cannot quite get this to not leak, so change of plans. Alright, so my previous piping that joined up to this was, no matter what bends I was doing, they were like wrong and in the awkward places, and they were causing kinks in the hosing. So now I've just tapped a thread into here, put that the nipple bit on there, through a couple of flanges, bolt it all nice and tight together with gaskets so that there's no leaks. My previous setup with the movable piping with the flange on the end, the flared end that the flange was holding down still had a very slight oil leak, so that's why I decided to just thread it. And this time, this piece of hose, let's say, will go on there and be clamped once the turbo is in place. This will go on the bottom of the turbo there, and then that's the pipe that goes down to the bottom of the motor for the oil drain. So that's kind of how it will look. There'll be a clamp on this end of the pipe, obviously, and then this one here goes to the other banjo bolt, which I put an adapter on. So what that means is I'll be able to connect all this up and then feed the turbo into the wastegate housing, and I'm not trying to fiddle around underneath doing the 10mm bolts, which if any of you have done that while the engine's in the jet ski, it is a little bit of a difficult task. So that's sort of a bit of a look at how the finished product's now going to be. So the Isuzu turbo is in. I can just move that out of the way. You can sort of see there that that is the oil feed line that I've got, oil drain line that I've got coming out the side. It goes down. Difficult to see, but down underneath the wastegate actuator. Yeah, I don't think you can see that down there, but screwdriver is pointing towards it. That's where that hose connects up to. and then that hose clamp down there, that's where the flanges have connected up from the line that goes to the bottom of the engine. It normally goes to the bottom of the turbo as well, so that actually has a line going up. You can only just see it there, and that goes up underneath the bottom of the turbo itself. So that's what it looks like in situ. Let's see if I can get the light up here a bit more, maybe show some more bits and pieces, give people a bit of a chance to have a bit of a look around, but it's quite difficult to depict what's going on here, but hopefully I've showed you enough from when it was just sitting on a bench top of what plugs into where, what has been made, custom made to suit what. And another thing is, generally as you're doing different things up, just reach in and check that turbo freely spins still, so that's nice and free. Haven't hooked up the intercooler pipe yet. I just want to get a video of where everything sits as best as you can possibly see. Might be able to see down there. You can pause the video if you need to and zoom in if possible. I don't know if I can zoom in. Yes, that deep down there, that's the flange setup. No, not too easy to see on the video.